Breck Aramella here. Today we're going to talk about remote ID, how it applies to drone pilots, and what you can do about it. So let's get right into it. So what is remote ID? Well, remote ID was formed mainly by commercial groups, not by hobbyists. So big lobbyist groups like the Commercial Drone Alliance and other groups like this had a lot of influence on the Federal Aviation Administration that made this thing called remote ID, which is a set of regulations that it's written out. And the entire regulation, I'll put a link to it below, is about 319 pages. So in this video, I'm gonna give you the most vital information and then tell you what you can do about it to hopefully make it good for people like you and I who are hobbyists, and also for small businesses and commercial work. Now I'm gonna give you a quick overview of what remote ID is, and then I'm gonna go into details about the most important points. So remote ID was formed by the FAA because they wanted to make the skies safer. At least that's what they say. However, in the document, we can see that's not exactly true. And I'm gonna break that down in this video. So will remote ID apply to all drones? No, it doesn't apply to drones that are government drones, and it also doesn't apply to drones that are under 250 grams or 0.55 pounds. So drones like the Mavic Mini won't be required to have remote ID. However, drones like the Mavic Mini that are under 250 grams that will be used for commercial work will be required to have remote ID. So if remote ID goes into effect the way it's written now, I have the feeling like a lot of Mavic Minis and drones like this will be very popular. However, things could change and you do have some time to voice your opinion about it, and that's why we're making this video. So if you don't have remote ID, you'll be very limited on where you can fly, and you'll have to be connected to a broadcast signal and a Wi-Fi signal if you want to fly farther than 400 feet, which obviously everyone does. Right now in the United States, if you have a drone and it's between 0.55 pounds and 55 pounds, you're required to register it with the FAA. However, you could have 100 drones and you only have to register once, right? But with remote ID, if you had 100 drones, you're gonna have to register every single drone with the FAA, and you're gonna have to pay that registration fee for every single drone. So it's gonna be much more expensive if you have a whole fleet of drones. Now, one of the big issues that people are talking about is the fact that if remote ID passes, what are you gonna do with your drone that you have now? You have a Mavic 2 or you have a Phantom. What are you gonna do about that drone in the future? Well, you're gonna have to retroactively buy equipment or do something. The companies are gonna have to come up with equipment that will be able to connect it to a Wi-Fi and broadcast signal. And this will require money, and a lot of people seem to be upset about it. We're gonna go into more detail later in this video, but broadcast and Wi-Fi equipment is needed for remote ID. Now the deadline for remote ID is on March 2nd, so we still have a little time, but not much. So I'll leave that in the link below of this video. You still can comment. It's been about 12,000 people that have commented on remote ID, most of them voicing their opinions that it definitely needs to be changed. And I'll leave that link below, and you can put in the doc number right here for that comment. So like I said, the FAA basically wrote up this huge document over 300 pages, and you can comment by March 2nd. And then after that, the FAA is gonna take a few months. It could take a year, but definitely a few months for sure before they reach a final decision about it. And then once they reach their decision, let's say in the fall of 2020, the FAA comes up with their final decision, for example, that decision wouldn't be implemented to about 3 years later. So we're looking at least three and a half years before remote ID will be implemented. However, it does need some significant changes, and I'm going to talk about that right now. One thing I will say is that there are thousands of car accidents every day in the United States, and about 100 car accident deaths in the United States. You hardly hear about any of them. All right, it's sad that that happens, but people don't really talk about that, okay? Or it barely makes news, maybe local news, but it doesn't make major news, and people don't think about it that often, even though it happens all the time. Same thing with airplane accidents. There's over 100 airplane crashes in the United States every year, and between 400 to 2,800 people die from airplane accidents every year in the United States. And some of these accidents people never know about. Of course, they might make some headlines, but it's not major news. However, if a drone crashes or if a drone does something out of the ordinary, people make a huge deal and makes huge headlines and everyone's talking about it. So our hobby as drone pilots, we definitely get signaled out because it's a new thing. Why is that? I think it's because a lot of people don't understand it. They're either ignorant, they're not educated about the hobby, and that's just what we have to deal with. So we're gonna try to make it better. Now I'm gonna go into details about remote ID, and some people are like, oh, the hobby is gonna end. We should just give up, it's all over. Well, that's just a defeatist personality. That's not a good approach to life or to anything, right? That doesn't really help anyone, okay? It's kind of a loser mentality, all right? We wanna take action, we wanna do something in a positive way. What can we do? Yes, ultimately, it's not our decision, but we do have a lot of input. We are the people, we can stand up and do something about it. And I think regardless of what happens, that's just a good mindset and approach for life, all right? I do understand a lot of your frustration, but please bear with me. Don't go down that road of either total apathy or it's just like a doomsday, we're just entirely screwed. No, we can do something about it, or at least we can try, and that's the right approach to go. Now I'm gonna go into the most vital details of remote ID as it applies to drone pilots. Okay, we can't cover all 300 pages. We're just gonna go into the parts that are most important, and I'm gonna make this video, not too long. What's going on here is that remote ID requires you to be connected to a Wi-Fi wherever you fly your drone. You have to have the broadcast and Wi-Fi signal, and you're gonna have to pay a monthly subscription as the way it's written now. That could be a couple dollars, it could be $10, it might be more, and that's something that no one really wants. That's really annoying, and obviously it's all about money. It's not about making the sky safe. If we need to pay a subscription to connect to Wi-Fi, then we got to use our Wi-Fi data, and then we have to buy the new equipment or buy equipment for our old drones to connect to be able to use them with remote ID. So that's super annoying. We have to pay money to connect to Wi-Fi so the government can track us, so the government and police can see where all our drones are. But the worst part about it is that not only are we paying for the government to track us and everywhere we are, as the way it's written now, it's very ambiguous. So those companies that we're giving our data to will not only give that data to police and law enforcement, but they could possibly sell it to big companies like Google, Amazon, etc. Not only do we give up our privacy, but we're paying for it and they're selling it off. So no one can agree with that. Why would you want to give up your privacy and your data and have other people profit while you're losing money? It just doesn't make sense. And it seems ridiculous to be connected to Wi-Fi because that will limit on the areas we can fly. I don't imagine we'll have the technology to fly in very remote places with Wi-Fi. It's very funny how they call it remote ID, yet it's really more like city ID or government tracking ID. But they use that word, whatever, to sound nice and fancy, to make it sound good. But in actuality, when you read the document, you'll see that this is not the case. So you'll be paying a subscription service just to be able to fly your drone, not to mention all the new equipment. Now, in my opinion, I think the government should pay for that. Why should we have to pay to do that? And also, think about if this happened to your car or your child's bicycle, all right? Imagine your child, every time they go and ride their bicycle, they have you have to put a transmitter on it so the government can track where they are, and they're gonna sell that data and all the information about your daughter or your son to big corporations, okay? Or everywhere you drive your car, all right, they're gonna track you for safety reasons. Obviously, we do wanna keep the airways safe, but to me, this is a very extreme, kind of George Orwellian way of approaching it. And then if you decide, hey, I'm not gonna have remote ID, then you'll basically only be able to fly your drone in like one spot, not very far at all, okay? So it'll basically be like taking pictures in the same spot every day, like in your driveway, or driving your car, or riding your bike in the driveway, and you can't leave the driveway. There's no point to it. So without remote ID, the way it's written now, you won't be able to really use your drone. Now, DJI has also commented that they agree we need something like REMOTEID to keep the skies safe. However, the way it's written now, they're very unhappy with it, as are, I think, every hobbyist drone pilot. At least we can agree on privacy, that we don't want the government knowing everything about us all the time and then selling our information to third-party and private companies. Just doesn't seem right. It seems like DJI is taking a middle-of-the-road approach, because it knows if REMOTEID goes into effect the way it is written now, DJI will have to satisfy the needs of its drone customers like you and I, as well as the FAA. DJI said, "While we strongly support REMOTEID in concept, we are deeply concerned that the FAA's plan is overly complicated and would impose heavy costs and burdens on drone pilots, leading fewer people to fly and restricting the benefits that drones can create." Now, back in March 2017, DJI wrote a letter to the FAA saying that it recommended that drone pilots should have their privacy. Thus, it seems that the FAA ignored this letter and wants to make a pilot's location and info available to the public. So DJI has reacted to the FAA's REMOTEID proposal by developing new software called Drone to Phone REMOTEID, which is an app that works on any smartphone, showing the general public real-time information about any DJI drone, such as the flight path of the drone, the location of the pilot, and the ID number of the drone. Now, DJI's Drone to Phone broadcast REMOTEID relies on a Wi-Fi connection between the drone and your smartphone and does not require an internet connection. This feature can be added to DJI drones by a simple firmware update. This app is not yet available to the public, as the FAA's final decision about REMOTEID will be available after March 2nd, and hopefully the FAA will consider all of our comments. So while our privacy and data may be available to everyone and sold to big companies, DJI is still saying it doesn't believe in a complicated way to be connected to your drone and is advocating that it should remain free. It seems a lot of drone pilots are upset about the FAA's proposed REMOTEID and DJI's Drone to Phone app. For example, Johnny J, a retired police officer, said, "Providing the location of a drone pilot is not a safe idea. This information in the hands of the general public will lead to harassment, assaults, and possibly theft." Now, there were many other comments to DJI's proposal, and Thagata said, "Wow, so anyone can steal our drones by going to where the pilot is. This is a really bad idea that anyone can look where my $1,700 drone is going to land. You just equip thousands of criminals with the fastest way to find out how to steal someone's drone." Dennis Barbas said that he was okay with geofencing, but that DJI's Drone to Phone REMOTEID is too much, and he had many privacy concerns. Dennis said he would switch to Autel or Skydio drones. While Dennis's reaction is understandable, if the FAA's REMOTEID passes the way it is written now, it won't matter what drone you have, be it DJI or Autel or whoever. REMOTEID will be required for all drones, which is why we all need to comment to the link I have in the video description before March 2nd. I think a lot of drone manufacturers aren't happy with REMOTEID the way it's written now, and I hope this video clears some things up. I might have missed some things because there's so much to cover. Obviously, I can't cover it all, but if you have something that you want to mention, or if you have a different take on what I talked about, please leave it in the comments below. Don't forget, by March 2nd, you still can put in your comment, and the FAA said they're gonna read every single comment before they come up with their decision. So just write in the comment how it applies to your hobby or your business as a drone pilot, and that paying a subscription service, paying for all this new equipment to be connected to Wi-Fi, and having your data farmed out to third-party entities, and the fact that it's very ambiguous the way it's written now in that aspect, that you're not happy with it. And really, REMOTEID benefits large lobbyist groups like the Commercial Drone Alliance and big companies like Google or Amazon that want their skies clear for them to do their thing. I think we can have both. We can have the commercial aspect and the hobbyist aspect and have our skies safe. And they relatively are very safe. And even if you wanted to do something bad with REMOTEID, it's really not gonna stop that, because someone who wants to do something bad doesn't need to pay that subscription and be hooked up to Wi-Fi and have remote ID to do something bad. They can find a way to do it. So with that said, I do urge you to comment before March 2nd if you haven't done so already. Leave your comments below. I do appreciate your feedback on this. Let's keep this hobby going, and let's not stand and let the government and naysayers and other people just tear down drones and our hobby and the activity that we love. And for many of us, this is our part-time or full-time job. All right, that's it for today. I'm Breck Aramella, the Drone Pilot Pro. And remember, siempre pa'lante, nunca para atrás.